Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the special meeting for Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. If we could all please stand for the pledge and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone, to the viewing public. This is the special meeting of October 1st, 2019. This is being broadcast live on Win TV and will be available for replay after the meeting is over. At this time, is there anyone that wishes to be recognized under audience to visitors at this time? Anyone wishing to be recognized under audience to visitors at this time? Seeing and hearing none, we will close audience to visitors. We will go to item 2. I'll be recognizing Mr. Fury for a motion.
Thank you. I move to approve the contract documents for the partial roof replacement for Clover Street School prepared by Hibbard and Rosa Architects, LLC, dated September 17th, 2019, state project number 1640100RR.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made by Mr. Fury, second by Mr. Ellerveld, for the approval of the funding to approve the contract. The background of this is it's a 7,000 square foot portion of the roof at Clover Street Elementary School is in need of being replaced. This roof area has become problematic with ongoing leaks. This section of the school roof was installed in 1995 and is no longer under manufacturer's warranty. A third-party professional inspection found that the water has saturated much of the roof insulation in a portion under the roof area. Moisture is making its way into the administrative office area of the building. Unfortunately, there are limited repair options except for a full replacement of approximately 7,000 square foot of roofing. This project will involve the removal of the layers of the roofing material and installation of a new roof for this section. The new roof will have additional insulation installed to reduce energy usage as well as to increase the slope on the roof. This will improve stormwater drainage on and from the roof and will comply with state of Connecticut requirements for minimum slopes on school facilities. Is there any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, bring it to the vote. Oh, Mr. Bosch.
I just ask on the numbers, there's no prices in this document. Do we have any ideas on the cost of the project?
So this has come before the board a few times now, and this is more of a necessity on the state side because they now approve the project. Now the board has to approve the approved project from the state. So the cost is still the same. They're forecasting it to be $195,000 for the total cost, but this, once we get approval from the Board of Ed, we go and meet with the state, and then we can put it out to RFP, and we'll really get better numbers after that.
So do we have a ballpark of what the state's given, about 100,000 or not?
Around 54% is what Windsor usually receives.
So we'll be,
All set, Mr. Bosch? Mr. Ellerveld?
I was just going to say, we'll be on the hook for about 45% of the cost.
Right.
Roughly.
That's correct.
The town would be.
The town, yes.
You say we, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Which the town is going to be
bucket?
responsible
Right.
for it.
Any other discussion? All right, motion made by Mr. Fury, second by Mr. Ellerveld, that we approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same. Abstentions? Motion carried. 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is presentation for advanced AP update, recognizing Dr. Cook.
Yes, thank you, President Lockhart. So yearly, we present our AP performance report for the Board of Education. In the last 2 or 3 years, we've done this through a special meeting and allowed the board more time to dig a little deeper into the report and presentation. So we're quite excited to share some news about the AP performance from May and June is when the students take the test, typically late May from 2019, so just these are last year's results, but we do some historical comparison, and you'll see some charts that you've seen in the past, and some new information as well that Phaedra DeRose, our assistant principal at Windsor High School, and Julio Sunday, our principal at Windsor High School, present to you, and then we've got, other members of the team here available to answer questions if we need to go deeper at the end. So I'll ask Uwe and Phaedra to come forward and share the presentation.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Thank you for having us here to present this year's, or last year's AP performance. I remember sitting here this time last year, and we had a different disposition. We are here today proudly to report that there's been substantial growth across the board through the efforts of our faculty and certainly through the performance of our children. So we will go right into it. I would like to introduce my colleague, Ms. Phaedra DeRose, Senior Assistant Principal at Windsor High School. So this slide highlights our enrollment, and right now, as you look at the numbers, this slide projects that approximately 24%, which really equates to 1 out of every 4 children at Windsor High School, has access to an AP course. And this is consistent with the district's philosophy on providing rigorous content to all students.
The next slide is actually looking at the total number of our AP students, and we're very happy to report that we have north of 250 students taking AP courses. This correlates again to roughly a quarter of our students accessing the AP courses yearly in that rigorous content. The next slide is showing our demographics of our AP courses, and the demographics of the AP courses mirrors the demographics of our school as a whole. So this again supports our district's commitment to equity and providing access to these rigorous courses for all of our students.
This slide is a little bit more of a disaggregated breakdown, and one of the things that we do know is that a lot more of the AP offerings are backloaded for upperclassmen. So in that sense, we're talking about juniors and seniors. We are proud to look at last year's graduating class and say that 105 seniors took at least one AP course, which effectively comes out to about 37 to 38% of the senior class. Those are profound numbers, and you're going to see why those numbers are important when you see some comparative data to some of our neighbors in the region.
Okay, so this next slide is just showing the number of exams that were given last year, 456 compared to previous years.
Right, and we're pretty proud about this because you see that number highlights that we offer north of 400 exams across the entire campus almost annually over the last 5 or 6 years. So that's something we're quite proud of. This is largely the number that we want you guys to see. Last year we presented this data and we saw a stark drop, and now we're reversing the trend. So we're always going to sit up here and we're going to tell you guys that we're proud of the things that our kids do. But I think what is a powerful narrative behind this is the fact that that number from the previous year really kind of shocked us as a professional school community. We felt that 53.5 was not reflective of our kids' capabilities, and it wasn't reflective of the work that our faculty put in over the year. So we challenged ourselves, and without a doubt, people stepped up to the plate. And what is good about this, you see that over 5% growth, is we feel like we still have some performance opportunities looking at next year. So the aim is to employ a lot of the same strategies and try to bolster it, and look at other subject areas that we have opportunities to improve student performance. So this slide reflects our subgroup performance, okay? So when you take a look at this from the previous year, you can see that almost across the board, every subgroup improved. One of the things that we're proud of as well is this number is very parallel, this chart, this performance chart is very parallel to what we're seeing with other large-scale assessments such as SAT. So although we can make the assumption that there's a causal association, when we see this trend consistently across different assessments, to a certain extent, we have to be able to look in the mirror at Windsor High School and say that the work that our faculty are doing are impacting our children, all children, in a favorable way.
So this next slide was something that, when I was digging through the AP website, I found that I hadn't seen this before reported out. 75% of our seniors, over the course of their 4 years in high school, have scored a 3 or higher on at least one AP exam. So this counts the student who took 8 exams as one person, as well as the person who took 1 exam. So this is 75% of all of our seniors took and passed at least one AP exam over 4 years.
This is a slide, obviously, we look to measure our success and our progress. This is a comparative slide when you think about some of the neighboring towns and some of the work that they're doing around AP. At Windsor High School, we are proud, based on the support of the board and the work of our teachers, we offer north of 20 AP courses, which is one of the top offerings in the state. So when you look at this slide, we are looking at the number of tests that were passed with a 3 or higher. I'm going to give you a little bit of context here as to why we are proud of the work that we're doing. Case in point, Wethersfield, the second town in the state of Connecticut. They have student enrollment numbers that's very comparable to ours, okay? And you can see that we are exceeding their pass rate by almost 70 students. You take a look at Newington. Newington has about 100 more students than we do, and they are a little bit more than we do, so we're a little bit interested to see what the practices are that it's really kind of producing some of these outcomes. Enfield has about, I believe, 1,500 students since both schools joined, and we are right there neck and neck with Enfield. And East Hartford has almost 500 more students than we do, maybe even more, and we are eclipsing them in that performance. Obviously, South Windsor is a giant on that chart. They're doing some pretty good things. I know we have existing relationships as a district with South Windsor Public Schools, so we're looking forward to building that partnership and learning from them as much as they can learn from us in other areas.
So this next slide is the correlation chart that we show you every year. We're always looking for a student's grade in a particular class to equate to approximately the exam score that they will get on that exam. But there's many other factors that go into a student's grade, as well as determining how well they're going to do on an exam in a specific day. This past year, we also administered 4 exams for classes that were not taught. So you can see those because there's some blank spaces in there. So these were students that decided they wanted to take this exam, and they worked on their own, or they worked with a teacher after school to study and prepare for this exam, and we were able to provide them with that exam and that experience.
The next slide just kind of highlights some of the specific courses that we offer at the AP level, and there's some more demographic breakdown specific to grade or gender. What you will not find on this list is about 4 exams that students sat for last spring that we don't offer as a course. I believe that number is 4, correct?
It was 4 last year.
4 last year that we don't offer, and I believe that performance across all 4 were 3s or north of 3s. So these are projections, as you see, for the 2020 school year for the administration of the test. Now, there is some attrition with add drop. At the time that we created this this presentation in September, these were the numbers that we had in place. But what we found is that there's some level of stability in that 24% of our students are enrolled in courses, and we typically offer, as we alluded to earlier, north of 450 exams during that first week of May. And that is the last of our presentation. We will field questions.
All right. Any questions from the board? Go ahead.
I wasn't
Mr.
planning
Bosch?
to go first, but everybody else is looking to go. So I believe one thing we do as a school system is pay for every student to take that AP exam, which is really a nice benefit.
It is.
That I want to highlight. Is everybody that takes an AP course, are we requiring them to take the exam as part of that course?
It is.
Absolutely.
So just to start off with maybe the tougher question I asked every year is the correlation chart, and I'm sure you knew this was coming.
I did.
And I don't know if anyone's ever think this is the question, but human geography, boy, that's one I haven't seen. I can deduce what it may be compared to geography, but the question is just on the correlation. I think English literature is a class that really shows, unfortunately, a negative correlation. We could see that 20 students, scored only a 1 on that, but nobody failed the class, and conversely, 39 students got A's and B's in that class, but only 5 students got 4 or 5 on the actual test. I admit not everything has quite that same correlation as English literature, but there's certainly the correlation between how students are getting scoring on the AP and how they're doing in class don't match.
Right.
And I know one factor is, as you said, the year is a full year and it reflects a lot of hard work. The test is one day, and there are students that struggle with that exam for different reasons. When you're in a pressure situation, you only have 3 hours to show all you know. But I don't know that all of these students are in that situation, and I think there's still something to be said where we have to look at this correlation. Why are students doing well in the class but not well in the exam?
Yeah. So I fully prepare for that question because you ask this question every year. So when I spoke about opportunities for growth, okay, those 2 courses that you just highlighted are what we as a faculty, as a leadership team, as we unpack the data, are really looking to target to answer that question. Over the last 4 years, you've asked this specific question every year, and sans these 2 courses, I would actually say that this is the tightest correlation we've had over the last couple of years. So I would say you actually even arguably answered your own question about the length of the course throughout the year versus the one-time test. We do a lot of things to simulate the test so kids get more comfortable and build more confidence, but for whatever reason, there is that gap, and that's work for us to do to examine a little bit deeper. English department chair and social studies department chair, Ms. Nancy Curley-Kirk, and India Monroe, we've had some of those conversations. Ms. Duras has engaged in work from a structural standpoint of really tightening up and bolstering what the AP Prep program looks like, as well as looking at new innovative resources that the College Board offers. And she'll touch on that a little bit. I believe we discussed that earlier today. So when we talk about a performance opportunity, we're largely looking at those 2 courses.
Thank you. And to ask on a percent of exams with score 3 or higher, do we know what the state average is for that, or ballpark?
We can get that to you. We don't have that right
We
now.
don't have that yet.
Okay, well, certainly one thing that we do that you highlighted is we offer a lot of students these classes, where other schools may restrict it to certain students. It's a really wide open offering, so in that respect, it's great that students are doing it. Another question I have is, if we know if there's any correlation for students that have taken an AP class and then they take another AP class, if they're doing better. We look at the scores, we see students are taking this as sophomores, juniors, and seniors. Are we seeing any correlation from a student that may have had an opportunity to take courses and they're taking them again versus, they're taking it for the first time as a senior? They may be.
We have not traditionally, so that's a good question, and that's something for us to think about. We have not traditionally tracked it in that sense, but I don't see why we couldn't. I don't see why we couldn't. One of the things that we do know is we have a lot of ambitious kids, okay, and By the time kids are seniors, particularly for those who begin to take AP courses as sophomores, by the time that they're seniors, a lot of kids want to position themselves to be attractive candidates to highly selective schools. And we also know that the trap in that is the potential to overburden themselves by trying to take on too many AP courses. So we're mindful about that, and we make sure it's a collaborative conversation with families as well as the child. We give advice, we give as much advice and as much support as we can to kids. But the question you just asked about tracking that over time, over the course of 3 or 4 years, I think it's something we can definitely look at.
And as a final question, is there anything that you would ask us, what you would need to improve the AP program?
Cash money. Cash money. No, I mean, you guys, the board has been unbelievably supportive. Okay, I know I was just making it funny there, but one of the things that allows us to work as hard as we do as a professional community is largely the confidence that you guys have in us and the support that you guys, not just from a resource standpoint, but also from a presence standpoint, that you guys provide for us. So I would just ask that you continue to give us that support. If anything pops up that we find to be an additional resource that we need, we will certainly channel that through the Office of the Superintendent of Schools.
Okay. Ms. Delville?
Thank you, President Lockhart. Again, we're seeing, and one of the things I noticed is the number of girls versus boys in AP courses. Are we doing anything to try to get more guys, males, into these programs versus the females? I mean, it appears to be 2 to 1.
It is 2 to 1. And I don't know the reason for that. Okay, I'm not entirely sure the reason to that. We do have some pretty balanced numbers in terms of overall enrollment. We have maybe 10 or 20 more girls overall than we do boys, so our numbers are quite balanced. We make sure that we promote the AP and the benefits of AP courses to all students. And we also look to promote the kind of supports that we can provide students when things become rigorous, because that's where we often find that attrition where people drop a course, right? And with this, I'm just making a correlational assumption based on this number. We do know that a lot of our females are a lot more persistent than the boys, at least with AP courses, and I think this number highlights that.
More persistent in respect to keeping their academics up.
In terms of rigorous courses, correct.
Yeah. Yep. And now, there was a conversation I had with someone a while back relative to the weighting of AP courses as it relates to scores for athletic, qualifying for being able to do athletics.
For CIC eligibility? Or Windsor
High's eligibility,
okay. Yep.
Which is, I believe, tougher than CIC.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the comments that was made that if the students took an AP course and ended up with a C, where if they took a regular course, they might end up with an A. I'm just hypothetical here. That the C would have a negative effect, even though the rigor is much higher in a regular course. So in essence, an A in relatively easier course has a weighting of an A, where a C in a relatively more difficult course has a weighting of a C, where if you compared it to the A, you might have a weighting of a B.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. Computationally, it makes sense. Okay, but I would tell you this: the academic habits of students who are enrolled in AP courses oftentimes outweigh whether or not the probabilities that they're going to fall into that range. Okay, as an athlete, so. Our athletic director has comprehensive responsibilities beyond supervising and managing 27 varsity sports, and I believe with the middle school we're somewhere in the 40s. One of his responsibilities is monitoring academic eligibility, and he does that on a routine basis with his assistant, Amy Hansen. So we have safeguards in place to make sure we monitor and we intervene, so all student athletes avoid falling into that trap.
All right. Another question, and we usually receive a nice little simple report that shows the alpha grade ABCD, ABCDF versus the AP grade of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
What are we finding that and I don't, and I see the correlation chart, which to me is extremely confusing because I can't quite figure out what you're correlating to what, but that's neither here nor there. The bigger question is how many students do we have that got an A, B, or C that didn't pull a 3, I believe it's 3, 4, 5 are the positive numbers, 2, 1 are the negative numbers. So how many of our students that did ABC did not get at least a 3 or 2 or 3, 4, 5?
So I don't have
Did I
that.
say that right?
You did. Well, I don't know if you said it right, but I understand what you're trying to get at. So we did not tease that out of the correlational chart, but it doesn't mean we can't. Okay, so I don't have that number for you right now, but I think that's just a simple review of the data and computing that, and then we can forward that to the board.
Because we've seen that number in the past, and, you know, I think there should be a relative, there's a correlation between the ABC versus the 543. It should be similar. Now, if we have a student's getting a B and they're not pulling a 3, that to me is a bigger concern. So why is there such a, you know?
Well, I think that's the point Brian Bosch is, Mr. Bosch has referenced over the last 3 years, okay? There should be, as tightly coupled as we can make that, we want to be able to explain that. So I did make the explanation when Board Member Bosch asked the question that this, in my opinion, is the tightest correlation we've had in recent memories. The gap now is still the opportunities we have with those 2 courses that we highlighted. There's a host of variables, okay, that might be able to explain that correlation. I wouldn't be able to sit here and tell you with empirical evidence that the fact that a child engages in study after school with the teacher, or they spend 5 hours every weekend working on things, is what positions them to get that A in the class. But when they sit for the test, they have stage fright or testing anxiety, and they end up getting a 2. I think for every child, and we have 263 kids who sit for the test, for every child they have a different story as to what really explains how or why they perform the way they do. But based on the question that Board Member Bosch brought up a few years ago, this is something that we annually prepare for because he's pretty consistent with this question, is we are looking at our work, including our conversations with our teachers who teach AP courses, and saying, yes, we recognize it, but our board members are recognizing the fickle correlation. What can we do to make sure we adequately prepare students so that when they pass our class here at Windsor High School, that when they sit for the tests in May, that they come as close to a similar grade. So that's going to be ongoing, and to be honest with you, I think it's going to be variable over the years based on the cohort, based on the child's skills. I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to give you a clear answer to that, but to the extent that we can, as a leadership team at the high school, we try to make sure that we address how loosely coupled that correlation chart was in the past.
Yeah, I would anticipate that you'd see some outliers, as you just said, students that are test shy, for lack of a better word, who have difficulty taking tests, and that does happen. And they're excellent students, just that when they're put under the gun, they freeze up.
Correct.
Also, you have the different school systems, and you compare to Wethersfield. Wethersfield has about the same number of students we have, or a little less?
I believe they have, I think there's about 70 more kids than we do.
Oh.
Yeah.
I know that the 2 school systems have been for years not too far apart from each other.
Yeah.
But they have fewer kids taking the test. Do you know the reason, or getting a 3 or higher? Do you know the reason for?
I have no idea. I can't speak for
And you wouldn't know the percentage who took the test and got 3.
I don't know the internal workings of Wethersfield High School. We do have friends over there, so we can reach out to them. But for the purposes, we presented that data for comparative reasons, not necessarily to really dig deeply into their personal data.
Academic performance.
Yeah, we just want to create context for the amazing work that our kids are doing and the amazing work that our faculty are doing.
Yeah, looks good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Mr. Fury?
Yes, on page 2, the number of AP students, the number of AP students went down slightly. Do you know why that might have been. It was not significant, but the number of students had gone up, but the number of students that took exams went down.
Yeah.
This is the same chart, right?
Yeah.
So you're referring to page number 2?
Number 2, yeah.
We don't have any kind of specific response for that. 15 kids is not a big variation for us. If we see a drop of about 40, 35, 40 kids, it picks our radar, and then we look to answer that kind of question. Whenever we see a variation of plus or minus 10, we can attribute it to the cohort, but we do also have add drops, okay? And sometimes a kid may drop a course that they feel that they don't need, or to opt into another course that has their interest.
And is it primarily guidance that would be talking to students about their courses and whether to take an AP course? And is there something specific that's coordinated between guidance and the different teachers who teach these? So I know we have a new guidance director for the whole district from last year, and we have had some change in guidance counselors in the last year.
Yeah, so Dr. McIntyre is a phenomenal addition to Windsor Public Schools, and she's come to the table with a lot of innovative ideas. One of the things that we have done is we have engaged in conversations to examine our recommendation policies, okay? Our practices, I should say. So everything you just mentioned is 100% right. Counselors work with students, they work with families, but our teachers also have a heavy say in terms of making those recommendations, because they know the students' readiness to engage in rigorous courses. So for us, we want to make sure that as many kids access it. So for us, the question is not necessarily about access, because it's the belief that we have. The question is, how do students respond, and how do we as a faculty respond when things become rigorous and kids are questioning their ability to be resilient? So,
congratulations on the 5.1% increase. That's really phenomenal. So it's not a question, but a comment. One of the things that there's a slight disadvantage that we have is, I think probably parents like that we start after Labor Day, but many schools, particularly in the South, start early to mid-August, yet the exam, my understanding is the exams are always the same time.
Correct.
So we're at a little disadvantage with the number of class time that we have. I don't know what we can do to make that up. I commend teachers, though, who go to Windsor Library on a Sunday or weekend slightly before that to spend that extra time and to be available to students. I've had several people comment to me about seeing teachers there with students prior to the AP. You talked about, one of the answers you had was, what else could we do? And you talked about money. Other than paying someone else to take the exam, which doesn't happen in Windsor, but other parts of the country have done that vis-a-vis college. What other things could we do differently that money might be a factor in?
You know what? I don't want to sit here and freeze right now. You guys are giving me the golden ticket. But I will say this, okay? I want to take you up on that offer, but I would like to engage in discussions with my leadership team, okay? And also create conditions where we can have conversations and hear directly from our teachers exactly what kind of resources they would like from the board. And again, what I would do is, after we have those conversations, I would channel it through the Office of the Superintendent of Schools.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Cook?
So that's literally a first in 4 years working with Mr. Sunday, where he was offered some additional supports and didn't immediately have 10 answers or a flip chart or something to share with that. But, as I kind of look back historically, in 2008, 2009, we were, giving about 145 students exams, about 215 exams. So we've really doubled that, over the years, and it's through the work of the high school. A group of teachers really started this work around that time frame, and then Project Opening Doors was a grant the district received, and some people may remember that actually gave financial awards to students and teachers for the exams passed. And I'm not suggesting that, but one of the best things that the grant had was really those AP Saturday sessions, and they also, what they did was it combined with other districts under those grants. And so I remember we had students that would get on buses and go to Wyndham because they had a phenomenal teacher in one subject, and then Wyndham students and East Hartford students would come to us, and it just was a full Saturday of preparation. So I think there is ways we could look at more prep, but I do want to thank the board. I think one, open enrollment, which is I think the difference between us and some of those towns on that chart, is really what drives our percentage numbers. The high school, certainly teachers' recommendations, school counseling, pushing students into the courses, but the fact that we have open enrollment, we're not looking at PSAT scores or waiting for a letter from the state. I mean, I shared this story year after year. I have superintendent colleagues that get upset every year when the state releases their AP eligible students list, and Windsor High School always goes beyond that list when they're looking at recruiting students. So it's never a problem that a student might be on a list and the family gets a letter, but they're not able to take a course at Windsor High School. And so that's just tremendous. And then also paying for the exam, so allowing us to say, if you're going to sign up for the course, you're going to take the exam. That's really something that Windsor has done. It's really pushed this further. And we got to remember, though, there's the payback to the family. So the value I think we could put on it, and then every course that's passed is $1,000. If you think about this being a college level course that a student is leaving Windsor High School with in their pocket. So if you think of 250 courses, you're talking about $250,000 that Windsor families are receiving in value from test being passed. So it's just it's always been a bright spot. I don't think we've had an art student not pass the test, and as long as I can remember, and so there's a lot of pride that the teachers put into it, and you see some competition among the high school between the departments, and one department might be down one year and the next year they're up and working hard. It's something I constantly hear from teachers, that they'll be gloating or apologizing or sharing their different strategies that they're using. But I think that's kind of what we miss, is those planned Saturdays where we could work with other districts and try and combine and do some of that work. That was really tremendous. But again, like I said, to the board's credit, you have put money into advanced placement preparation just recently. I think that was a big piece of the 5% increase. And again, I believe our goal should be the number of students taking the exam. That should be just taking the course exam. That should be the number one goal. But to see 75% of seniors passing at least one, I mean that's pretty elite category. And I'm taking a look at some other towns too, when she went through that. So that's a pretty strong number there. So congratulations to the high school, and thank you for the board for your support of this.
Great. Any other discussion?
Chairman.
Mr. Alec?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have a question, and I apologize for getting here late.
No problem.
I just wanted to ask you if students with like learning disabilities, if they're encouraged to take an AP course, and how are they supported through that course?
Right. So if a child has an IEP, they're going to be supported through the IEP. But as Dr. Cook just made mention, any child, whether they have an exceptionality or not, have access to all the different opportunities that any other child would. But the modifications that happen through an IEP will be granted through the course, and would also be granted on test day through the College Board. Very good question.
Do you have anything else, Mr. Bosch?
Yeah, thank you. Just one thought. I don't think there's an answer prepared for this, but one course that we're looking to develop in the high school is an SAT preparation course. And I'm just thinking about that course as we're having that discussion. I would think as we develop that course, there'd be some transferable skills on taking tests such as the AP. Right. So as you're meeting with the leadership team, and we're also developing the SAT prep course, and maybe an opportunity right there, how do we, what ideas do we have to put in there, and how can this course help not just for the SAT, but other things like AP.
Correct.
So you're welcome to respond. I think, that's a kind of an in development thing, but there's just an opportunity right there for, the work that's coming forward to help here too.
So you're spot on, okay? And we have had, we have been having those conversations about how there can be some transferability across the different standardized assessments. And even looking at to what extent there's alignment with the NGSS, which is new for our juniors, okay? So we've had some very deep conversations. Our department chairs, Ms. Thomas, Ms. Maines, Ms. Curley Kirk, Ms. Monroe, as well as the assistant principals, around how we can have a through line in terms of our universal practices. So in whatever we do instructionally, we see the benefit in student performance and student learning across all these different things. So what you just mentioned, I believe, is the end game, is a universal practice that's done at a very high level that impacts kids wherever they go, and based on whatever assessment they take, in a favorable way. I don't know what that end picture looks like. I think we have to remain in this cycle of continuous improvement and constant reflection about our practices. But your observation, you sound like an educator. Your observation is spot on.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you spoke about the golden ticket. I'm definitely in favor of granting a golden ticket. I'm not shy about that, but I'm also not shy about the expectation that comes along with that golden ticket. I would love to see at least 75% across all groups, subgroups, I don't care what group they're in, passing this exam with at least a 3. And I've always been concerned, I share Mr. Ellevel's concern, I've said it every year about the more females than males actually participating in the program. I think that might be a deeper rooted issue that we may have to take a look at outside of this. But definitely want to see a little bit more balance in that particular area. But I would love to see more kids across the board, no matter what kid it is, at least get a 3 on this exam. And that's the big push I would love to see you and your team focus on, how we drive that.
Of course, and here's what I would say. We're always going to aspire to that. I think the 75 is a number that, when I first arrived, when the board appointed me almost 4 years ago, we saw the number in our historical records of 75. And I think with the work that we're doing right now, we're trending in the right direction. We have some pretty solid goals for next year for another aspirational jump. We've had the conversation as a leadership team. We've had the conversation with Dr. Cook and Dr. Oliver. So we're going to take it step by step and hope that we can build on this year and eventually get to that 75%. So that's always going to be a commitment for our professional community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Recognizing Dr. Cook for agenda item number 5, which is the profile of a graduate update.
Yes, thank you. So, as you know, and the board received an update in the spring and once prior on our work with profile of a graduate. This is major work the district has undertaken, and I think we feel it's important for us to periodically update the board and get your input and feedback in terms of our growth and where we're at with the process. So I have really there's multiple teams working on this, but the small team that had started this work 2 years ago of Dr. Oliver, Mr. Sunday, Ms. Jorgensen, Ms. Noha Abdelhadi, and Ms. Peterson, and myself, who've been working through CAPS and started this work 2 years ago, is here really to give you an update on where we are and how we've received feedback and where we stand right now. So I will turn this over to Dr. Oliver.
All right, good evening.
Good evening.
Just checking on our technology here. So my name is Santasha Oliver, and I am here joined by several colleagues to provide an update on the profile of a graduate. I have Tracy Peterson, principal of Pequannock School, Principal Jorgensen from Sage Park Middle School, and of course Ms. Rose Sunday, who you've just heard from this evening. And our agenda for this evening basically is to provide the board with a brief update on the development of a profile of a graduate. So our specific work around this with our stakeholders, such as teachers, administrators, families, students, and really the district work here is to rethink how we educate our students in an ever-changing society. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Osende.
So we're going to start here with a quick video. When we began working with Ed Leader 21, one of the things that we spoke about is trying to get as much community involvement in defining the attributes for a Windsor graduate. With the support and work of our video production teacher, Mr. Jeff Gooden, he was able to visit every campus in our town and capture snippets of our kids around this work. We have Windsor High School students Alexis and Serena, who will watch a quick 2-minute clip of this video.
Can you switch over?
Video's not playing.
No. It's still on the slide.
Kevin to the rescue. We can see Kevin here. I shouldn't read everything right out here. I know, it's from my head.
There it is.
Hi, my name is Alexis.
And I'm Serena. And we're students at Windsor High School. Go Warriors!
We'd like to invite you to participate in this thought exchange. The contributions you make will help us answer the question, what are the most important skills and attributes Windsor students need to develop in order to ensure success in learning, life, and work beyond school?
With your input, the school system will create a portrait of a graduate that will reflect the shared vision of the community. The results of this process will guide rigorous academic content, intentionally fostering critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity, and other 21st century skills we young people need to thrive in this complex and rapidly changing world.
By participating, you will be part of an open yet confidential conversation between staff, students, parents, local businesses, industry leaders, and community members. You will directly help us shape the learning environments of our future.
In the next few screens, you'll have the chance to share your ideas about what skills every Windsor graduate should possess to lead them on the path to success after they graduate.
We need you and your thoughts to help us unlock the potential genius in every child from pre-K through high school.
I want to make a difference in the world. We are Windsor.
We want to be the change we want to see.
I want to make a difference.
I want to be the change I want to see. Help us reach our full potential.
It's all right, man.
Okay. So we're excited about this work. We spent a lot of time on this as a district under the leadership of Dr. Oliver and Dr. Cook. But to speak to the skills and attributes, we're looking at our children pre-K through 12. And the idea is that over the course of time, in addition to the academic skills, competencies that they acquire, when they reach grade 12, we're looking at the attributes, the dispositions, and the habits of minds that they have. So when we send them into the world, we know that they're adequately prepared. So the idea is this, is that when people see a Windsor graduate, okay, and I'm saying Windsor graduate because it's pre-K through 12, it's not just the high school. People can look at that kid and say, you know what, that's a Windsor graduate. Similar to the way people say, you know what, that's a Harvard graduate. So we have a very distinct set of attributes, skills, almost akin to a DNA, that all graduates who come through our town and through our public schools, we can say are adequately prepared for their transitions.
So we started this conversation well over a year ago. And as you heard from our students in the video, we're trying to develop a shared vision within our school community. And so some of the conversations we've had have been around kind of what cognitive capacities should underpin students' learning experiences as they progress from preschool through the high school. And also what personal competencies are most valued at school but also at home. And so we took this conversation to our staff and our administrators, and here's what we came up as a district. Basically 6 competency areas, including academic learning, social emotional learning, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, as well as innovation. And then as you saw in the video, we continued this conversation with our community partners, our industry partners. And so as you heard, there was a day where we invited local industry into the district to have a conversation about us. So what's their ideas around what a Windsor graduate should look like? And so I want to take a moment just to acknowledge some of our industry partners, such as Trident Machine Tools, Westfield State University, Waste Management, Pitney Bowes, WFSB, and of course, Town of Windsor. We had representation from the Windsor Chamber of Commerce, as well as several members of our Board of Education. And I think it's really important to take a moment to acknowledge those industry partners, because to me it speaks volumes about our shared commitment to develop our students for a workplace that has yet to be defined. And so throughout that conversation, what we did is we kind of facilitated a small group conversation as well as large group conversations, and we were able to get their thoughts summarized here in terms of the attributes that they felt are most important for Windsor graduates. And so as you can see here, some of those things include collaboration, emotional intelligence, as well as student agency.
So in addition to our staff and community industry partners, we also sought feedback from other valued stakeholders. Where you see we sought feedback from our parents in our community. We sought feedback from community members, those who are a part of our community but may not have students that attend our school system. And so the main question that we continue to ask our various groups of individuals was essentially, what are the skills and attributes do Windsor students need to develop in order to ensure success in learning in life and work beyond school? And so to make sure that we facilitate a conversation that sought to get the most amount of feedback as possible, we subscribed to this online thought exchange platform. The thought exchange allowed individuals throughout our community to answer this question from the comfort of their home, from their cell phones. The district went on an all-out campaign to make sure that we got as much feedback and input as possible. And so as a result, we had over 700 participants giving us about 764 thoughts, and the individuals were able to go in, create their own thoughts, or rate other individual thoughts that were already in existence from a rating of 1 through 5, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the best. And so when the information was aggregated, this is what we have in front of us. And some of the attributes that came out as a result of the community discussion are very similar to those that came out through our industry partners and also our administrators and staff. So we see a reoccurrence of communication and collaboration, innovation, creative, and critical thinking as well.
So here we are, after all of that collaboration, soliciting feedback from a variety of stakeholders and community partners. As a small group, we sat and tried to synthesize that information, right? You can't have a list of 50 different attributes that you're trying to develop in students and to develop them well. And so, as you did see, there was a lot of commonality, so it wasn't as hard as originally we may have thought. And here is our first round draft of where we've landed. As you know, the first business we have here is to prepare students with the academic competencies that they need to be both college and career ready, upon which our curriculum is built, which is our main driving factor. But embedded in that, we know that students also need to develop their both social and emotional awareness so they are more than ever prepared to go out into society and navigate the world as we know it. We also came up with communication and collaboration. We want students to be able to both orally and in writing communicate their ideas, but also the power of collaboration and working with others. We want students to be both creative and critical thinkers, being able to think in novel and new ways, but also be able to really critically think about problems being put before them. And then lastly, to be innovators and problem solvers. We know that in this new world that we are all inheriting, you're going to need the ability to think in new ways, to come up with new innovations, and to be able to solve problems that we aren't even yet aware of, and the problems that do currently exist. And so this slide basically outlines the relationship between the process in which Dr. Oliver will go into more detail. But as you can see, it started with, as was mentioned, a small group of us just developing a big vision of, here's something we want to do. We want to develop the profile of the graduate. And then throughout the process, we collaborated with a variety of different stakeholders, gathering their feedback, coming back with an initial draft. And now this year, the work will really be to examine, so where do these pockets of opportunity already exist? As Mr. Sunday mentioned, this is a pre-K through 12th grade endeavor, so we'll be examining our practices in our buildings, looking at our curriculum, looking for opportunities that already exist to highlight and develop those attributes, and then gaps where there may be a need to fill in some of those pieces, and continuously communicating with not only you, but in each of our respective buildings and our parents and communities along the way.
So as Ms. Peterson mentioned, I think we took our time to think about what this process should look like. As shown in the long-range plan there, we actually started this project, or thinking about this project back in 2017. So there's many different ways to think about how one or a district develops a profile of a graduate. So here in Windsor, I'm really proud of that timeline, the fact that we were, I think, very thoughtful and strategic about how we went about it. We developed a small advisory committee, so 4 of the members are here. But we also took a lot of effort to go out into the community and engage our stakeholders and get input and feedback from our stakeholders. So I just want to highlight that as well, because it's important that while we started talking about this, in 2017 as a small group or an advisory committee, this really is the work, the vision of a community. And so now we're at the point where we're developing our profile of a graduate, and we're ready to adopt and utilize our profile of a graduate in all of our strategic planning. And so this slide really just outlines kind of the leadership planning, our leadership moves, so next steps to continue to lead this work. So as you can see here, we're still at the very beginning stages. We're continuing to have community conversations and creating consensus. But the real work ahead of us, as Ms. Peterson mentioned, is to align our systems and begin to build professional capacity so that we're able to embed this work in all that we do as a district. So with that being said, this summarizes our update to the board on a profile of a graduate, and we welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the board? All right, Mr. Fury.
Sorry. So if you could flesh out a little bit more about what, I know the other steps, and I was involved in several parts of the steps. if you can flesh out a little bit more of what this year will look like. And one of the things, just to comment on, my daughter just moved from LA to Boston, and I looked at a few of the jobs she was applying for, of what the skills were, and collaboration, critical thinking, creativity. These things are all in there, where you then have to give examples of how you've done these things. So I think, even though, and content, and also content area was important as well, that we, and I know that's important to you. But again, if you could say where we are now and how we get further along this year.
So one of the things that we've talked about, although we've defined these attributes, if all of us were to look at those 8 different words just simply on there and provided our own definition of what those words meant, we'd find that we'd probably have more variation than we actually think. And so one of the key steps is really working with all of the stakeholders to really define, what do we mean when we say a critical thinker? Or what do we mean when we say a problem solver, or someone who is innovative, or socially and emotionally well-balanced, right? What do those attributes actually mean? So one of the really key important steps is really defining those steps, co-creating that definition, ensuring that we're all on the same page. Then other steps would include examining our curriculum, developing rubrics and metrics to assess those attributes. We don't want to say we're out there creating students who have these attributes but have no way to really measure how far and in which ways they've been developed. So I would say those would be some of the key steps, as well as what I mentioned earlier, really looking at our curriculum, where are the opportunities where these things already exist, and we need to align them with our strategic operating plan, in our expectations in the buildings, along with teachers. So those would be some of the steps I'd mentioned.
Yeah. Thank you. Any discussion? All right, well, I want to say thank you. I know myself and other board members, we were part of that collaborative discussion, and it was a very full, it was almost standing room only. And we're very excited about the work that you're putting into this and how far down the path you are. So again, thank you very much. Thank you. All right. We are at the point of the agenda for announcements. Recognize Ms. Taylor. Any announcements?
I heard and I saw a portion of the calling all Windsor men as I was dropping my daughter off to Sage Park. And because of that, there were so many of them. There was a little bottleneck because people in the cars wanted to wave to the men, and the kids wanted to go through the tunnel there. And it was really active scene at Sage Park that I saw, and Ms. Jorgensen, everybody was outside. It was really nice to see the turnout. So I would just say thanks to everybody who turned out, to all the schools, because then I saw all the pictures online. It was super to see. So that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Ms. Delvaux?
Excuse me. This Saturday, there's a food packaging project at the Craig Academy of Aerospace and Engineering. If anyone's interested, they will be packaging over 18,000 meals in a 5-hour period in conjunction with a group called Outreach. So if anyone's interested in volunteering, reach out to the Windsor Rotary Club. They're the primary on that function. And that's it.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Khan?
Nothing today.
Thank you. Mr. Halleck?
No announcements today.
Thank you. Mr. Fury?
Well, I always have to do a plug for Team Paragon, who will be helping with the Rotary event as well. A shout out to Mr. Bianchi for getting through Saturday with Northwest Park, mum sales, blood drives, and I saw him collapse at gyms at the end of the day with his wife. But a shout out to him for getting the community service students in Windsor involved in our community. So that's it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fury. Mr. Bosch?
Nothing at this time.
All right. One thing I got is we do have a board meeting on October 16th. And it's not a goodbye, but see you later to Minority Leader Mrs. Michaela Fissel and to Mr. James Dobler, recognizing them for their time and service on the Board of Education. It will begin at 6 o'clock. The board meeting is at 7, and as customary, the executive committee will be available to the public from 6:30 to 7, but saying this is something special, we'll be available to the public from 6 to 7 before the meeting. And that's all that I have. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Ellaville. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ellaville, second by Mr. Fury. In discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. We are adjourned. Have a good night.